This is my second part of my 100 Atomic Heart Facts video. If you haven't seen the first episode, it will be in the description. Let's start with the facts you have written down in the comments. The water counter signifies the coolant of the car because in the USSR the coolant was too expensive, so water was used instead. The vending machine you can find in the Vavilov complex is a real-life model AT-114, which was the most popular model in the USSR. Also, when I mentioned that you can shove one more ammo in a magazine, this apparently is a reference to putting one round in the chamber of the gun. Also, coming from the same commenter, the Vova model at the parade is flipped, and that is why it's different from the one in the VDNH. You can find a bit more info if you look down in the comments under my previous video, but now let's get to the new facts. The vacuum cleaners in the VDNH can damage enemies. Furthermore, they can even stun lock them, allowing them to not get up. But this state is quite weird because they don't appear to take damage when they're on the floor, so they actually have to get up in order to take damage. This can actually create problems because in order to attach Claire's parts, you need to clear all enemies, but because they are on the ground, they can't get up and chase you, and also they can't die, which can result in searching for them for hours or even reloading the last save file. Fun fact, I've discovered this while doing my Atomic Heart Pacifist run, so if you are interested in that, make sure to watch it after the end of this video. Alongside the inventory and map section, you have one that is called lore, not codex or info, no, just lore. When playing the snake minigame in the Burov area, your inputs are a bit delayed, making this easy Google Chrome game quite hard. If you hit the flying machine exit tube, it will spawn bees. If you push robots back into the cell where they came from, they'll be trapped there, which can lead to some interesting situations. If you freeze enemies during an attack, when they unfreeze they will continue this attack, which can lead to you getting hit if you're not careful. In the first few seconds of Ivy's soundtrack you can hear also when Plush does his QTE attack, there is no penalty for pressing the wrong button, so you can just press your entire palm on the keyboard in order to press every button and get the button right immediately. Also, like during the takedown QTE, there is only a specific range of keys that you will have to press, this being Q, E, F and spacebar. What's also interesting is that in the trailer for Atomic Heart, you had to press C in order to complete the QuickTime event. If you find this Vovchik arena hard, you can lure them out one by one to make the fight much easier. Jumping down in water doesn't deal any damage despite how shallow it is. If you freeze enemies using the frostbite and then lift them up using mass telekinesis skill, they will unfreeze, making this a counter synergy. If you go to collect Claire's head, you will hear that she is reading a poem that's called The Carcass by Charles Baudelaire. Also, the puzzle you need to solve in order to get to the head makes no sense because Nechayev could just use his telekinesis ability to take the ball and drop it in the hole and not waste precious time. Although this is more of a game sin. Also, let me know down in the comments if you want a video where I discuss everything wrong with Atomic Heart. All Tereshkova robots have arms that are colored in beige, but the arms that you attach to Claire are different and actually belong to the ballerina robots. If you look at your character while you're in Limbo, you will see that Nechayev is depicted as the Pushistov monster from the trailer. Normally, these rockets in Limbo are supposed to launch you in space, but sometimes they don't do that. Sechenov tells right to deal with the body, but instead left is going for it. Either the boss bars are lying or Sechenov. But if we assume that the boss bars are right, then we can notice that during every single cutscene, left is always on the left and right is always on the right. Also, the ballerinas are called left and right because one contains the left part of Yekaterina's brain and the other one the right half. After exiting the VDNH, if you go to this bus stop, you can notice a bee that is stuck in this phone booth. Speaking of the VDNH, it is an actual real-life museum located in Moscow that stands for the Exhibition of Achievements of the National Economy, which doesn't stand for VDNH. That is strange. Another real-life location is the statue of the worker and the kolkhoz woman, built in 1937. Furthermore, the location of the statue is also accurate to the real-life counterpart because it is also located near the VDNH. The shock baton Vova how do you even say this? The shield that the shock baton Vova version uses does not protect him from the mass telekinesis skill, making it very effective against them. Also, let me know down in the comments if you want a video where I showcase all enemy vulnerabilities, and believe me, there are going to be some surprises. The Beast Friend achievement is bugged because it was given to me after I interacted with the cow and not the other two animals, although this footage is quite old and it might be fixed. There are multiple side areas where you can find the Belash boss, but this boss does not count as a real boss, but more like an elite enemy, so despite the fact that you kill him, you wouldn't get the achievement for defeating the Belash. This is the only instance when we see a modified Vovchik that actually walks and attacks, and it's quite sad that you can't find them during regular gameplay. The railgun is the only weapon in the entire game that doesn't have any upgrades whatsoever. Seriously, even the Fat Boy has some. And also, it's not a railgun at all, because it uses energy instead of, well, regular magnets. If you defeat enemies that are right in front of the safe zone, they will not be revived. You can disable robots in certain areas, but if you hit them, they will be reawakened. But you can always get behind them and then immediately execute them using the stealth takedown attack. The polymeric jet works very well with the shock ability because it can infinitely just stun lock enemies. The Belash boss in the theater has a different attack to his open world counterparts, which can catch you off guard if you are not careful. If you ask the ballerinas about the show in the theater, she will describe the game you're playing right now.
The play features fine humor, epic battles, fantastic special effects, and a touch of heart-wrenching drama.
The ballerinas and the Vova bots have K2 written on them, although I don't quite understand what this means. Furthermore, after finishing the theater section, the ballerina will say that a new performance will be available 1 year later, which is obviously a reference to the future DLCs. In my first 100 Facts episode, I wanted to make a joke about Sechenov smashing the twins, but the game just straight up confirmed it.
Say, are the ballerinas here? Just ballerinas?
The topic of robosexuality is extremely popular among the Soviet elite. Robosexual lobbies have become quite powerful, and it would seem that the sale of related services is flourishing at the theater. In other words, no, the ballerinas are not just ballerinas.
Do you think the boss knows about this?
What do you think?
Well, given the robots he's chosen as bodyguards, Guess he's a robosexual himself.
According to Ozhigov's Dictionary of the Russian Language, the word robosexual is a facetious term for a person who enjoys intimate relations with machines, generally while manipulating...
Okay, I get it. He can go ahead and manipulate whatever he wants. What he does with those androids of his is none of my business. But I gotta admit, they are kinda hot.
The plush boss needs to interact with a sprout in order to switch in his second phase, so if you kill all the sprouts around him, you can continue the fight as normal. You can actually easily defeat hordes of sprouts using the mass kinesis skill. If you have the mine upgrade for the fat boy, the mines you shoot directly at enemies will stay attached to them for a while before exploding. But the thing is that if an enemy with a mine gets too close to you and it explodes, it might end up killing you. The password you need to enter in order to start the show is randomized every single game, so unfortunately you have to look for it every time. The bee that delivers you the container for the head is invincible. And it is also the only friendly bee you'll find in the game. Also, the container where you put the head is in the enemies and creatures tab for some odd reason. This area contains the hardest lock in the entire game, if we don't count the one in the theater. When you're using a car and you open your map, the character will be displayed in a car icon. When you scan enemies, they become thick. Normally this is done to notice them easily when scanning, but it looks so funny, especially with humanoid enemies like Vovas, for example. The scanner overall seems to inconsistently mark enemies. For example, factories are marked as enemies, except when they're not. It's quite strange. Speaking of factories, if you hit one of them, they will spawn laser bees. But more interestingly, if you run away from the attacker bees, or they just lose you, they will return into their house, which I find quite cool. There are a total of 2 IV bosses on the bridge alongside lots of mutant mini-bosses. Actually, this area contains lots of missable loot. And also, while fighting them, I've noticed that despite the fact that the sprout in Ivy's mouth looks green, it doesn't have to be a green sprout that interacts with him. If it's a sprout of another color, it will just become green. Furthermore, when the sprout is infecting the Ivy boss, if you get the timing right, you can kill the sprout and not let the boss go into his second form. What's interesting is that after you do this, the sprout for some odd reason will have the same color as Ivy's body. The plush boss takes a lot of damage from the mass telekinesis skill. If you look closely, you can notice that the medic bots have these flasks on their heads. They act like weak spots that retract after you hit them, allowing you to easily get rid of these enemies. In the hospital, you can find IV mini-bosses in these big tubes that can come out of there if you use your mass telekinesis ability. But if you don't do that, you can skip this boss entirely, which I find very cool. Normally, this area is supposed to have lots of mutants that attack you at the same time, but the majority of them just end up dying from the moving robots. The mass telekinesis skill, okay, I understand you're tired of hearing me say this for the 20th time, but it's really effective against flying enemies and it just looks very satisfying. The Limbo soundtrack is from the film Annihilation, and I'm sure you have already heard it.
Reconstructing illumination.
Also, when you are inside Limbo for the second time, most of the doors you will encounter will have some sort of specific name. And if you translate this text, you will notice that doors with positive qualities like softness and happiness are locked, But doors with negative and painful messages like torture, amputation, suffering and pain are open, and you have to go through them in order to complete this section. But the creepiest message is this one. If translated, it means legs forward, which doesn't make any sense at first. But in Russian culture, dead bodies are always carried with their legs towards their destination, so they don't see the place where they died and don't come back there. And this is also the reason why if a person is badly hurt or unconscious, they're always carried with their head towards the hospital, because if you carry them the other way around, it brings bad luck. The testing ground 12 is the only testing ground you can just walk into. You don't have to solve some sort of puzzle or find a key. No, just press one button and you're good. In testing ground number whatever, why couldn't it just give them proper names? In this ice area, the pipe through which you have to pull the heating module is closed by a wall, but the heating module can pass through it just fine. Speaking of polygons and testing grounds, if you count all of them, you will see that some numbers are missing, because there are only polygons 1, 2, 6, 8, 9, 10 and 11. And I have a theory that the other 3 testing grounds will be in the future DLCs. Speaking of which, if you want to know more about the future DLCs and Atomic Heart 2, make sure to watch my video where I talk about what the developers plan to do in the future. If enemies die in water, you cannot loot them. For some reason, during the Dewdrop fight, the boss and the ambience music play at the same time, which makes this boss even worse. And if you wanna know why I hate this boss fight so much, you can watch my video where I review every single Atomic Heart boss. The underwater city of Neptune is an obvious reference to Rapture from BioShock. Actually, looking back at my footage, you can even hear Sergei mention Rapture.
So that's Neptune, huh? Looks nice. Actually, it looks amazing. A rapture. I wouldn't mind spending some time there myself.
Oh yeah, and in case you're wondering, yes, I reinstalled BioShock just to show this 10-second clip. If you look through Zaharo's personal files, you can find a computer that will tell you the origin of crispy critters.
Nechayev has emerged from his year in rehab a new man, with new habits and behaviors. For example, he's become fond of a certain euphemism. Crispy critters. It all started after one of the medics described him and Blesna as crispy critters during his recovery. He was still in a coma at the time. He suddenly leaped out of bed and nearly strangled the medic to death. The staff subdued him by shouting, "We're under fire," after which Plutonium ducked for cover, hit his head, and passed out. Ever since then, crispy critters has become part of his vocabulary. Could it be an example of psychological imprinting?
During your final trip to Limbo, you can find the dead body of Dr. Filatova. Also, every single time you go to Limbo, you can find this strange cat. But what's more interesting is that in the real life locations, well, in game, you can find drawings of this cat with text that says he is here. If you decide to scan a ballerina, you will see that they have no vulnerabilities whatsoever and only one resistance, while all other enemies' info screens are littered with icons. If you perform a mass telekinesis attack on the twins, she will leave a shockwave when she drops down. Also, this spider form that you see in the first phase of the boss fight will completely disappear once you get to the double boss. While walking to Sechenov's office, you can find lots of info about robots, but some parameters looks very strange, like the damage potential that is measured in kills per hour. How do you calculate this? There are just so many different variables. If you drop a Natasha on 20 humans, she will have 20 kills per second, but if you make her fight 5 tanks at the same time, she'll be destroyed. I don't understand how this was calculated. Speaking of Anastasia, you might think that she is the heaviest robot, but she weighs only 500 kilograms, while the Dewdrop is a gigantic 850 kilogram robot. The Drafa is the only robot that we can't fight outside of cutscenes. The woman that voiced and acted the ballerinas is a real-life ballerina currently performing in the Bolshoi Theater. And what's more interesting is that she started her own cosplay. I just wish I didn't get this info from r/AtomicHeartRule34. If you watched my previous 100 facts video, you might know that I've made a hypothesis that the ballerinas will use the same abilities as you, and I was right and wrong at the same time, because some abilities like the Frostbite and the Polymeric Shield are not used by the twins. And also some abilities like the Mass Telekinesis skill were modified, because when the twins use it, it only lifts you up and doesn't smash you to the ground. During their laser attack, the ballerinas are invincible. The canonical ending of the game is very similar to BioShock. The main hero is guided by his ally just to realize at the end that he was the bad guy all along. After watching this cutscene for around 10 times, don't ask me why, I've noticed that you have the regular trash skin of the glove, even though I have the golden glove. Man, you know what, this game is a scam. Also, in the same cutscene, you can notice that the ballerina doesn't have the red Soviet star on her head. Could this mean that Nechaeva is finally free? Probably not, because I just made this up, but I find this detail quite interesting. No matter what language you play on, the ending credits will always be in English. Also, the credits are actually a video, and that's why you can't speed them up or slow them down. If you choose the option to return to Facility 3826, the game will become really broken. Some bosses will be dead and alive at the same time. I don't know how you call this state, but it's pretty weird. And second, some story-related characters and just story-related dialogue will play even though you have already completed the story. So just don't return to Facility 3826. But you know where you can return? On my YouTube channel to watch my other videos, and also I will be soon uploading videos about Hogwarts Legacy, Elden Ring and Dead Island 2, so make sure to subscribe to not miss that, and have a great day.